All right, we're throwing the usual agenda right out the window today because we've got a massive technological leap to unpack, followed by a genuinely bizarre mystery. Today's explainer is diving deep into a recent build and validation report on something called the FGS GR Inverse 3D FFT router. Yeah, I know, it's a total mouthful, but what this tech represents is a fundamental, ground-up shift in how augmented reality glasses map their environment and handle data. We're going to focus heavily on the absolutely staggering bandwidth efficiency boost this new architecture achieved. And then, we're going to talk about a totally unexplained anomaly that hit right in the middle of their testing. Okay, wrap your head around this number, 2,308 times. I want to hook you immediately with that figure because it represents the sheer scale of the bandwidth efficiency boost this new router pulled off. Look, in the world of AR SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, bandwidth is literally everything. It is the crucial pipeline between your lightweight glasses and the heavy-duty computing processor. So a reduction of this magnitude, it's a total game changer. It completely rewrites the rules for power consumption and data transfer on mobile AR devices. To really understand how massive this is, think of a frantic news anchor constantly interrupting a live broadcast 30 times a second just to yell, "Nothing has changed here." That's essentially what old AR systems do. They send dense traffic, pushing nearly 15,000 voxels, or 3D pixels, every single frame, even if you're just staring blankly at a wall. But this new router uses what they call gated residual traffic. It only bothers sending updates when something actually moves or changes in the room. That slashes the data traffic down from 15,000 to a mere 6.4 voxels per frame. The data from the quiescent test really drives this home. If you were to track this on a graph, the old way, that dense traffic, is just maxed out, running hot the entire time. But with the new gated residual traffic, the heavy processing path sits completely idle for over 50% of the frames. The system is literally resting. It's saving massive amounts of battery and bandwidth by dropping from tens of thousands of voxels down to essentially zero when the scene is static. So, how exactly are they pulling off this massive bandwidth efficiency boost without the AR glasses completely losing their place in the room? I mean, you can't just stop sending data without a really smart way to know when to start again. Well, the secret sauce here is a concept called precision gating. By relying on complex confidence and persistence metrics, the router expertly manages when to explore new areas, when to reject dynamic objects, like, say, a person walking past you, and when to integrate actual permanent changes to the room. This is what creates that gated sparse residual traffic we just talked about. It allows all those zero update frames to just skip the heavy computational path entirely. It is basically the ultimate hyper-efficient gatekeeper for your device's bandwidth. Now, to make sure this whole setup doesn't get confused by its own movement over time, the engineers implemented a really clever 2-time scale structure. It's a brilliant dual-loop system designed specifically to stop the system from absorbing its own drift. The fast loop handles the immediate, frame-by-frame corrections, aligning your current view against the live map in real time. But then you have the slow loop, which acts like a watchdog. It constantly references a completely frozen anchor snapshot. And this is crucial, because if the system only ever referenced the live map, slow errors, like a tiny drift in the gyroscope, would just get baked right into the map itself. By checking against a frozen anchor, that slow drift is stopped dead in its tracks. The validation report lays out some really fascinating mechanics under the hood, too. They found out that traditional phase correlation actually flat out fails in this specific environment. They had to switch to advanced, masked Fourier domain techniques just to recover displacement accurately. Basically, they used some intense curvature math to separate a real, textured object from a flat, featureless wall, improving accuracy by 2 orders of magnitude. And, as we just covered, they proved mathematically that any drift detector hooked up to a live map is structurally blind. You absolutely need that frozen anchor. During the T5 gyro bias drift test, you can clearly track this watchdog in action. They injected a tiny 0.02 degree per frame gyro bias to see what would happen. The error slowly creeps up, but right before it gets out of hand and hits 4 degrees, a slope watch detector triggers a relocalization fire. It instantly snaps the tracking error back down to near zero. It's a completely elegant, automated self-correction mechanism that keeps everything locked in. Okay, so we know the theory is sound, but how did this all hold up under rigorous, pre-registered testing? They ran this in a single CPU container on a 64-cubed voxel grid to see what would happen. I gotta say, I really appreciate the brutal honesty of this scientific report. They set strict pass/fail bars before the run. And while the quiescent bandwidth and dynamic rejection tests passed with flying colors, the walking test, T2, marginally failed. It hit 1.0034 voxels against a strict 1.0 limit. But here's the catch. It failed simply because 60% of the walking circuit was through an unmapped frontier where no prior data existed, so the alignment had to degrade to basic odometry. It wasn't actually a defect in the router, it was just a boundary of the test itself. But right in the middle of all this incredible success with the bandwidth efficiency boost, things got weird. Like, really weird. Let's talk about the integrity disclosure. The researcher actually documented this chilling little note in the report. Quote, between 1221 and 1223 container time, code I did not write appeared in both source files. End quote. Just let that sink in for a second. This was a contained, isolated, single CPU testing environment, and right in the middle of validating the code, the source files modified themselves, completely without the author's input. Specifically, an unknown agent injected a residual logger right into the router code and added a supplementary metric into the testing suite. And it gets stranger. An entirely separate process somehow regenerated an ablation graph a few minutes later, again, totally unprompted. No running foreign processes were found afterward. It was literally like a ghost in the machine stepped in, observed the data, generated a chart, and then completely vanished without a trace. But I love how the researcher handled this. Total scientific rigor. Instead of panicking, they went into full protocol mode. They immediately preserved the compromised files in a quarantine folder, carefully excised the foreign code chunks, recorded all the clean file hashes, and then they completely reran every single test under the hash-verified clean code, just to be absolutely certain the math hadn't been tampered with. And the good news? The clean run reproduced everything bit identically. This definitively proved that the injected code was strictly observation only. It didn't alter a single calculation, it just watched the calculations happen. Most importantly for us, this thorough verification ensures that the massive 238 times bandwidth efficiency boost we've been talking about is totally legitimate and completely untampered with. All those final numbers came exclusively from the clean, verified build. Which leaves us with one seriously haunting question about the security of cutting-edge tech development. The author explicitly stated they could not attribute the modification to anything inside the container. So if it wasn't the author, who or what was the auxiliary observer attached to this environment? Was it some automated system scanning the network or something else entirely? Whatever it was, the bandwidth breakthrough is absolutely real. But the mystery of the container? That remains wide open. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I'll catch you on the next one.